Hello and welcome to The Frontline, a podcast for LGBTI activists from ILGA-Europe in Brussels. My name is Brian Finnegan, and in this episode we're asking what happens when people in social justice movements direct their righteous anger inward at one another. What happens inside the LGBTI movement when we start calling each other out? It's a question that Sabah Choudrey from Colours Youth Network and the Inclusive Mosque Initiative in the UK explored with their inspirational talk at the ILGA-Europe Annual Conference last October, which we'll be sharing with you later in this episode. But first I'm sitting down with my colleague Nads to talk about why we're exploring this question in the first place. Welcome to the Frontline, Nads. Sabah's talk at the conference was very popular with our participants. Can you tell me what led to including it in the programme?
When we sat down and we were thinking about how to form the program and how to shape it, and it's a process, so it's a lot of discussions around that. The questions that guided us were, what are the concerns and questions and needs that are coming from the movements? So we can translate them into the spaces at the conference and ask these questions there, or maybe find some answers, or at least open up the spaces for a discussion. And repeatedly, the topics that came about were around dealing with internal tensions and conflicts and misunderstandings and contradictions that are very often led to almost disintegrations of their alliances and some ruptures in the groups and some lack of understanding or communication, or so where the cohesion needed to be, there was a lack of cohesion. There was a breakdown almost of connections. And we had more and more questions coming how to deal with that. So we looked into what underpinned that, which was on the one hand, the external world that we're living in, that is marked by the polarization, that is much more hostile in a way, with the rise of right wing, with the rise of opposition. So it weighs really heavily down on activists when they do work and live in this world. And on the other hand, there is a digital world with reactivity and the fast pace that really leaves little space for pause and thinking and conversation, actually, not just reaction, but a conversation. And so we felt that we needed a space, not necessarily like conflict, because conflict is really also all-encompassing words that erases the difference between mistake and misunderstanding and critique and contradiction and harm. So we felt we needed to open up a conversation around the way we react and deal when we face with differences, and the need for difficult conversations around very often actually shared values. And this is how the thinking formed. And then another thinker, who is Adrienne Maree Brown, with her thinking around cancel culture, came about and shaped a little bit as well, or narrowed the focus of our exploration. And then we found Sabah and worked with them into focusing on particularly on a cancel out culture and on the prevalence of a little bit of punishment culture in a way in the movement, and what can be alternative to that, how we can shape our thinking differently when we are entering activism and when we are facing with differences and difficulties, even before we start speaking or having a conversation.
Yeah, I attended the talk, and it was really, as I said, very well attended by the participants. Obviously, there's a great interest in this particular subject, not only the idea of conflict, but the cancel culture element of that and how that's playing out into the movement. How are we seeing at all in ILGA-Europe, how that might be playing out?
I think it affects activists on many levels. It affects people personally, obviously, because it affects the way how people feel who they are as activists, as human beings, how they're treated. The belonging is very important, and the shared values. So outcasting someone has a really long effect. It affects activists, it affects groups and organizations that need the community and the togetherness in order to do a common action and stay motivated and feel that it makes sense what they're doing as a group of people, as a community. It affects a bigger movement locally on the level whether groups can actually have a conversation between themselves, how they can resolve when they approach the common goal differently maybe, or have some misalignment not on the values, but on the course of actions. Are they able to pull resources together? Are they able to pull other groups across the social justice movements? And then it affects, of course, the movement in Europe as such. So I think it just amplifies the effect in a way, and it kind of has a potential to create more harm and more rupture and more disconnection, which is, ironically, is the aim of the opposition, to do that. So it's very painful to see when we do it ourselves in a way, and it can have a very detrimental effect personally and professionally and across the movement and movements in multiple form as well.
So this is something that we've identified that we want to work on at ILGA-Europe. Can you talk to me a little bit about how we're working forward?
Yeah, we were looking into the ways that would be meaningful for the movement and for us, and what is our place as well, what we can offer. And I think it was within the forms that we have been doing. It's convenient spaces. It's spaces where we can open this conversation and offer different ways of having these conversations, working across differences, working with differences, or working as allies alongside different types of activists. Also looking into very practical skills on actually holding difficult spaces, holding spaces for change, and holding spaces that are intrinsically maybe challenging to hold. In these circumstances, recognizing that with the things that are happening in the world, the conflicts and the wars and the political situation, we will have more and more this kind of situation. So it's also good to act proactively and to have certain skills, hands-on tools to deal with this conversation on the level of the team, maybe in the organizations, or how to hold meetings across different organizations, or maybe in the inter-regional platforms as well, where we can come in to offer and hold the space and facilitate. We would be doing this as well, but this is the plan.
So, as you said at the beginning, we wanted to pause and take a pause and have a moment for Sabah's talk at the conference, to pause and reflect. So we'll take a pause now and we'll listen to Sabah's talk, and we'll come back after that.
So my name is Sabah. My pronouns are they or he, or you can just gasp in awe. I call myself a reluctant activist, a writer and speaker on all things trans, brown and hairy. My book supporting trans people of colour is available now online. I am a British Pakistani, Muslim, transmasculine, able-bodied, middle class, queer. I'm a therapist. I'm a griever. I'm a leader. And for all those astrology queers in the room, I am an Aries Sun, Cancer Rising, and Taurus Moon. But you probably knew that already. So I want to start this with my whole self, my full identity, to give you choice. Because I might not be the person you want to hear from, or I might be. And I want to start this with openness and tell you that I am open. I'm open to learning, open to being corrected, open to disagreement, open to dialogue. And I want to thank you all for showing up to interrogate cancel culture, to sit with the discomfort of a community that can be so loving and yet so punishing. And to reimagine accountability, to reimagine caring and healing spaces. We are here because we are all activists, willingly or reluctantly. We are change makers. We may have been hurt, or we may have hurt others. But I think we are all here because we want our community to be better. when Nads asked me to speak on this topic back in August, it was like the stars aligned. I was actually trying to untangle the public call-out / community boycott that I'd found myself pulled into, and I'll talk more about this later. So cancel culture and community conflict were very timely for me. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, I found myself feeling quite anxious and unsure when I was preparing for this talk. The words weren't there, and I felt like I just had to justify everything I was saying, and what I wrote had to be perfect. And I realized then that I was worried about how this would sound to you, to each of you here. What if I say something wrong? What if I don't give the right context? What if I get called out? What if I get cancelled? Yeah, I'm doing a talk on cancel culture, and I'm the one worried about being cancelled. It's pretty ironic, but it's also kind of sad. Is this really the culture that I'm a part of? One where I'm so anxious to talk about getting cancelled for fear of getting cancelled, to hope inspire you to not feel anxious about getting cancelled? It's not convincing, is it? It is sad, but I'm here to change the culture. And if it means being anxious because I'm still quite nervous, it's okay. And sometimes I will be unsure of what I'm saying, but I don't want to be held back by fear, and certainly not held back by a cancel culture and system that doesn't work for community discourse. I will say now that what I'm not talking about is calling out for cancellation in cases of rape, sexual assault, intimate partner violence and abuse. Call-outs are necessary in those cases because, as Adrienne Maree Brown says, the call-out can be the only move that stops the immediate harm without engaging the state. Shaming behaviours of abuse in a culture where they have been normalised in is a necessary survival technology. Call-out in those instances is the emergency brake we need. But what I am talking about is conflicts, tensions, accountability, certain kinds of harm, and the health of our community. Now, I mentioned a tangled moment I found myself in this August, so let me transport you to London. So picture this. It's Brat Summer. Iced oat milk lattes, rainbows everywhere. Too hot, not hot enough, not very demure. Pride parades overtaken by rainbows and corporations, demands for fossil-free events, genocide-free prides, queer spaces shrinking, racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, all increasing, far-right violence rising, safe spaces shrinking, Palestine still hurting. And an Instagram account called the Lad Fund rises to support London area drag performers who are withdrawing their labour for Palestine. They were posting pinkwashing maps this summer, highlighting and calling for a boycott of Pride events with sponsors with ties to the genocide. Rightfully so, there is no pride in genocide. And one of these events was UK Black Pride. UK Black Pride is a free event for LGBTQ people of colour in London and beyond. They have a huge following and community. They've been going for 19 years, so you can imagine the impact of this call out. Now, this happened days before the event. Now, I was in a difficult position. I was working with my organisation, Colours Youth Network, and we were running the first ever dedicated area for young people, children and families at Black Pride. We were in charge of stalls, a programme of events for the day, a stage, and hundreds, maybe thousands of people coming through. In the meantime, performers were dropping out, friends were changing plans, and people were getting called out for attending. The pressure was on, and I had so many questions. What does the Lad Fund want me to do? What can I do to support LGBTQ Palestinians? What can I do to support people of colour, young people and families who are attending their first Black Pride? What do I do? I needed more information and I needed more time. But like I said, this was in the week before the event, following a wave of racist far-right violence in Britain, and the priorities for all involved for Black Pride were safety and security. There was no more information and there was no more time. Now, this is an issue of miscommunication, contradictions, and misunderstandings. This is a miscommunication. Black Pride had not communicated with us, the community, about who their sponsors were and where their money was coming from. This is a contradiction. Black Pride stand for justice and freedom, and to have sponsors who are funding a genocide in Palestine is a direct contradiction of that. This is a misunderstanding. Black Pride did not know all the information themselves about some of their sponsors' ties to genocide. This is not abuse. That lies maybe with the sponsors themselves. This is conflict and a series of mistakes. Yes, this does hurt us, hurts all of us. You know, I felt disappointed, angry, and really frustrated, as so many of us did. But so what are the solutions then for miscommunication and contradictions? Is it cancelling Black Pride the justifiable answer? Is calling out the only solution for conflict resolution? Because we have so many more tools in our community belt that I don't think we're using. And I don't think the answer is a call out. I don't think resolution looks like cancel culture. This does not feel healing, resolving, or powerful. And I care too much about my community to be cancelling our people based on miscommunications, misunderstandings, and contradictions. So who does the accountability for Black Pride sit with here? Is it with those who are more privileged, more financially able or resourced, more powerful? What happens when we give those in power more accountability? Now let me ask that a different way. Does the accountability for Black Pride sit with white, cisgender, heterosexual counterparts? Or is it with LGBTQ people of colour, global majority communities? Or is the accountability with LGBTQ Palestinians? Is that intersectional? Is that justice? Now, what we needed was a clarifying conversation with Black Pride to share information, to receive critique, and to find a resolution together. What we needed was a nuanced conversation about what real ethical funding looks like and what sustainable intersectional change can look like too. One of the people who echoed a lot of my thoughts around this was Dr. Ronks, who uses they-them pronouns. They're a queer, Black, non-binary doctor, feminist, and television presenter. They performed at our youth stage at Black Pride, and they donated their fee to Palestine. But Ronks got called out for attending, and they responded on their Instagram with this post. I hear that there are concerns regarding some of the sponsors. My single boycott of Black Pride does nothing to help anyone in Gaza. So you say, don't go to Black Pride. Okay, I don't go. I don't teach any skills. My mental health suffers. I don't get work. I can't send the money to Palestine. The person who receives it doesn't get it. Ronks gave the example of their impact versus them having a direct impact in abuse, crime, or partnering with those sponsors directly. And this, attending Black Pride, is a way for them to do good. They ended with, learn to call in with kindness and stop perpetuating the behavior of our oppressors. Even if you are right, this is not how we collaborate. It causes harm and division, and this is how the oppressors win. Now this exactly is what Adrienne Maree Brown was talking about in her book, We Will Not Cancel Us, Dreams of Transformative Justice, which has influenced this talk today. Brown asks us quite simply, what is our vision? She has a vision for abolition. But first, we have to find the rigor to fight fair, to struggle in principled ways, and practice accountability beyond punishment with each other. Principled struggle, a term coined by Tanya Lee on conflict framework, which was brought into Black movement spaces, which means struggling for the sake of something larger than ourselves, not for the sake of undermining each other. Brown also writes about the origins of call-outs, a strategy for marginalized people to stand up to those with power. a way to bring collective pressure to bear on corporations, institutions, and abusers on behalf of individuals or oppressed people who cannot stop the injustice and accountability on their own. And call-outs exist to do just that. And they work. But what we are seeing are waves of shame, humiliation, and social destruction from misunderstandings, contradictions, conflicts, and mistakes. Brown says, call-outs elicit both a consistent negative and dismissive energy and pleasurable takedown activisms, regardless of what the call-out is addressing. It has started to feel like every kind of dissonance in movements is understood through a lens of violence, abuse, and victimization. Now, I wonder how many of us can relate to that. What we see is that we are using shame as a learning tool and a punishment as a form of justice. And I don't think I need to tell you how powerful and impactful shame as an emotion can be. As an LGBTQ community who is still persecuted and stigmatized, we still carry shame, and we are overcoming it too. We are fighting the same systems of oppression that we are simultaneously internalizing, and shame is a mechanism of that. So we cannot be expected to grow from further being shamed from within our community. Shame does not give anyone any room to grow. It doesn't give us an opportunity to be better. Shame hurts us. Shame tells us we are bad. Shame tells us we are unworthy. And from there, we shrink. And we cannot let this become normalized for the sake, the health of our communities and for each other. We cannot expect to dismantle systems of oppression when we are using the very same mechanisms to dismantle our community. We cannot and will not understand abolition and transformative justice when we punish first and ask questions later, whether we think we are a good person or a bad person, when we operate within that binary, or when we publicly shame people, demanding instant actions and reactions without a conversation or mediation first. Unless we have an analysis of abolition and dismantling systems of oppression, we will not realize what's in our hands, and we will never put the predator's tools down and figure out what our tools are and what they can be. So why are we cancelling? Why are we calling out? What do we want when we cancel us? Maybe we want to distance ourselves from those who cause harm. Maybe we want to avoid direct conflict because we aren't used to doing that, or we aren't shown that to do that in a healthy way. Maybe we want to protect each other. Maybe we don't want to become the next target. Maybe we don't know how else to regulate our anxieties or our stresses. Or maybe we just want to vent. So we call out. But who does that benefit? As Rong said, cancelling them or Black Pride won't help anyone in Gaza. Brown herself writes, I can't help but wonder who benefits from movements that engage in public infighting, blame, shame, and knee-jerk call-outs. I can't help but see the state grinning, gathering all the information and data it needs, watching us weaken ourselves. Meanwhile, the conflicts are unresolved and harm continues. We aren't talking about intervening abuse here or harm happening right in front of us. There's nothing with a countdown or a deadline, so we can take a moment. We don't have to react before we respond. We can just pause. Now, I can't say that I've always had a clear vision myself. You see, I once thought about calling out someone publicly online. I was living in Brighton, a seaside town known for its thriving queer community, vegans, and terrifying seagulls. I was in my early 20s, an early transition, with a person who was not good for me. And I remember the exact moment I identified this. I was sitting in a domestic abuse training, going through a list of signs of emotional abuse in relationships, and she ticked every one on that list. Sadly, the relationship took some time to end, but when it did, I was angry. I was hurt. I wanted to feel better. And in our queer Brighton community, we called out people online, especially our exes. So I started to write a post. I wrote post after post. I wrote about me, I wrote about her as if I was writing to her. I wrote poetically, I wrote angrily, but I never posted anything. What stopped me? This was emotional abuse. It happened to me. And whilst we could argue that it warranted a call out, I realized that a lot of people are talking about abuse online, and not all of it was clear. It was a word that I saw getting misused a lot. And unfortunately, I felt like me calling this abuse would just be misunderstood. Unless I detailed exactly what was happening, so it's clear it was abuse, triggering people reading it, but that doesn't feel very caring. So I asked myself why. What did I want from this? I didn't have an ask, I didn't have a solution. It didn't feel powerful or like a resolution, or it didn't feel like a transformative use of my time and energy either. Would it help her become a better person? Would it help me be a better person? You know, there would be more emotional consequences to this if I did post something online. Online things can take a life of their own and get away from us. Would this help me or help her? Did I want revenge? No, that's not me. That's not a part of who I am. I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be heard and believed, and I wanted to heal. And I ended up actually sending a couple of pieces to a friend, which did feel very healing. I got the support and care that I needed. And for her, well, her healing or her accountability, that's not my responsibility. She, like many of us in our community, are survivors who do also cause harm. And I wish we had more skilled facilitators, mediators, and healers to be able to give her what she too needed. So who does the accountability sit with here? Is it with those like her who are more privileged, more resourced, or more able? And what happens next when we give those in power more accountability than those with less power? Is that justice? Or is that just one element, because we are also needing a space for people who are disempowered as well to heal? I do not regret not calling her out. I do not believe that she should be excluded from places where promote her growth or healing or belonging. I do believe we need transformative justice. Kai Cheng Thom is a writer and a gorgeous teacher and healer on the practice of revolutionary love. And she spoke on a podcast I heard about being harmed by an ex too. She talked about not feeling important or valued by them. And she said, my vengeance wouldn't change that. It would make me more of a monster than I would like to be. Now, these are, of course, our own personal experiences and just two instances, but it offers some helpful questions. In the face of harm from one another, how does our feeling of value and importance get restored? In the face of harm from another, will revenge or vengeance bring healing here? In the face of harm from another, do we have enough spaces and resources to heal? Do we know what we need to heal? I had the privilege of hearing Leah Cohen, who's the author of Why Would Feminists Trust the Police? She explored the issue with our binary thinking and wanting transformative justice. She said that we don't live in a clear world of villain and hero, of good and bad. That binary doesn't work here, so revenge or vengeance won't work either. Because when we call someone bad, we label them as deviant. They become disposable, and we'll want to dispose of them. But this is a carceral mindset, where punishment is the only solution, and we imprison deviant people. And I don't know about you, but I'm not the biggest fan of binaries anyway. They're restricting. And when we liberate ourselves from binaries, we have possibilities and opportunity for growth. So what if we released that good-bad binary? What if we thought instead about bringing this person in? What if we instead asked, okay, what is the actual thing that is going to reduce that harm and make sure it's not going to happen again? What if we started to build the system of accountability and community care that we want in the here and now? What if we reimagined collective accountability? Now, last month, Thom posted on her Instagram for an accountability call out after receiving trans misogyny in public. Now, what happened next was a beautiful show of reimagining collective accountability. She writes, yesterday I posted about a group of men who harassed me from their company's truck. I took a picture of the truck and was tempted to post it online alongside a call out. Instead, I made a post asking for folks to comment with a commitment to one action they can take in the next week to support trans women in their community. I promised to donate $1 to a local trans organisation for every commitment, up to $300. In 24 hours, over 300 people made commitments, beautiful, powerful and diverse commitments to making change. She says, I'm committed to finding ways to respond to harm, not with punishment, but with actions that change the social conditions that enable and encourage harm. I understand deeply the longing for revenge, the desire to administer painful consequences to the people who have harmed, humiliated and abused us. I feel that longing every day. Yet, experiences like yesterday's gave me so much hope, and hope that so much more is possible, that as a collective, we can make magic happen. Imagine a world, she says. Can you? I think I can. Now I want to return to where we started, slowing down, pausing. We have to take time to make sure that we have all the information we need to form an opinion and to understand what is happening. We have to make sure that we know what's going on and what's possible by making sure that we are not being rushed to action. With time, we can be clear and precise in the language we're using. With time, we can make sure that our critiques, questions, and invitations for conflict resolution are met with the care that we want for each other. With better communication, we can build healthier communities. And by slowing down, we can make more room for survivors to be heard and believed. We can create more spaces for healing. And we can have more space to reimagine new accountabilities. We can build more hope. So, let's pause so we can care for us. Thank you.
Nads, a very inspirational talk. What was your feeling about what was taken from it?
I felt people were very attentively listening, reacting really vividly, and the sheer amount of people who showed up and stayed and listened and stayed a little bit later and approached Sabah and talked, and who then showed up in other conference spaces that were dedicated in one way or another to handling difficult conversations. That spoke volume for me for how important this topic is. And I think the idea of the talk was really not giving a clear answers or okay, now you go and you apply ABC, but more reflecting inwards, how do we react? What is our go-to reaction when we're facing something that is a bit different than us? Can we find or think some alternative ways of doing things? Can care and accountability coexist, or we oppose it? And I think a lot of these questions were left in a way, in an inspirational way, for people to ponder. And I felt like people were inspired and uplifted, which was the point, because if you are just depressed, the world is depressed as it is, so you don't need another conversation about it. And I think it really, seeing activists who were inspired by it really makes, everything made sense then, this space and this conversation, and it felt really as an opening, as an invitation. And because it was received so warmly by activists, it's definitely an indication that this is a direction we need to go, all of us, not as ILGA-Europe, but all of us as a community, and explore and ask questions and look for certain ways of doing things and trying that.
So we'll be thinking, and we're inspired by it here at ILGA-Europe as well. And as you were talking earlier on about the thinking forward around this arena, we'll be continuing to explore ways of working with it. Thanks, Nads, for joining me, and we'll thank Sabah for allowing us to use the talk as part of the Frontline podcast. And thank you for listening to the Frontline. If you like our podcast, please like or share it or comment on it, and please tune in next time when we'll be travelling further on the front lines of LGBTI activism in Europe and Central Asia. Bye for now.